Hello, friends. I want to propose a question to you. Is creation true, or is evolution true? Or is both creation and evolution true when mixed together? I hope and pray you'll stay tuned, because tonight on Central Bible Talk, we're going to be giving a true answer to this question, so just stay right there.
With all the confusion in the religious world today, there is still truth in the world. From the Central Church of Christ, located in Saraland, Alabama, we bring you Central Bible Talk.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Central Bible Talk. My name is Wes Garland.
I'm Clifford Newell.
And we are just so very delighted to have you join us tonight as we are studying this subject. Tonight we were thinking about starting a few little episodes of a series in basically confronting creation or evolution. And basically what we're talking about is the fact that one of these has to be true, okay? And it is the case that it's either, if creation is true, then evolution cannot be true. And if evolution is true, then creation cannot be true. But then people try to mix them both together and they say, well, why don't we just have the best of both parties? Why don't we have creation with evolution and we'll call it creation evolutionists and everything's going to be fine? Is that true? Well, we're going to dive deep into that tonight as we begin this whole series of lessons, because, Clifford, this is something that I think is the crux of every single bit of faith. Because it's either you believe that God was in the picture at the creation, or you don't. And if God was not the one who caused these things to happen, what happens to the rest of our faith?
It's certainly not on any good foundation.
It's not on any good foundation at all.
That's right.
And it's just so mind-boggling to myself to even think that people would even challenge Genesis chapter 1.
Right.
And so, friends, what we're going to be getting into tonight is we need to realize that even from the earliest times, man has been interested in the question of his origin. And the further that our origin is pursued, the closer one gets to the matter of God's existence. And that's why we're saying it is the crux of the matter of faith. It's either you believe what the Bible states or you don't. Or you have to add something to what the Bible actually says. It's not there in order to fit something that is outside of the biblical knowledge. But here's the thing. Whenever we think about creation and evolution and even approaching man's origin, it's only appropriate that we begin with the beginning of all things, and that is the creation mentioned there in Genesis chapter 1. Now, let's just go ahead and get on into this, because I do want to get into a little bit of an examination of really what Genesis 1:1 and 1:2 are actually talking about, because it's either the case that it is the case or it's not the case.
Right.
And so what does Genesis chapter 1 verses 1 through 2 say?
Well, verses 1 and 2. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the water. Now, all of our scriptures are going to be taken from the New King James Version, yes. So there'll be some consistency there. What is interesting with this, Wes, is the fact that, we talk about going back. If we want to find out the origins, we have to go back to the beginning of creation. Where do we read of that? We read about it right here in Genesis 1:1 and 2.
That's right.
Now, often I like to pose the question, why does the Bible start off this way? And I think there's some very good reasons. God was telling this to Moses. Moses, in turn, wrote it down about the year 1500 BC. Yet this goes back to possibly 3000 BC, or in around that time frame. So the point of it is, God wanted man to know about origins.
Why is that so important?
It's so important because if we don't owe our origin to God, if God didn't create us, then why do we answer to God? He has no power, no say, no sway over us. And the Bible is not important. It's not the Word of God. God is not important. If this verse right here is not true, then you've just eradicated God. And if you eradicate God, then man's thinking and his philosophy will just run wild, and you'd have, instead of the three views that we're going to be looking at, you'd have all kinds of variations, and none of them could be proved without any kind of objective standard.
Now, there's a couple of things I want us and our audience to understand, is that, friends, whenever we're talking about origin, you may be asking, what are you talking about? What we're talking about is our beginning stage, okay? Like our beginning, how did we come into existence? All right, that's what we're actually talking about. Where does our beginnings lie, okay? Now, but the interesting thing is as we're looking at these verses, my friends, understand that when we're talking about this, it's important for us to understand that when we're talking about creation and going all the way back to there and how important our origin really is, if you want to know where your beginnings are, just like in our own, what do they call it? Our own family trees, right? Our lineage. It was so very important if you're really interested in knowing where you came from. What do? You get on Ancestry.com, you go on these other family tree websites, things like that, and you do a deep study. And what's very interesting about that is that each one of those websites actually give you evidence for the existence of your ancestors. And it's a really cool thing. But what about mankind? Because is it the case that there was numerous individuals that were out here before Adam, and all of a sudden Adam shows up and now God says, I want to choose this man to say he's the beginning of all create? No, that's not how he does that. You cannot be the beginning of something if you're not really the first, okay? So there's going to be some terms in here that's going to be very, very important for us to understand. And as we get to those points, we're going to be breaking these things down, okay? Now, I think, Clifford, something that's very key with this, we're not talking about theories, because we have to realize what a theory is.
Right.
By definition, a theory is something that cannot be proven.
Right.
Okay, it's a good hypothesis, is what we say in the scientific world. It's a good guess. It's an educated guess.
Right.
That's all it is. It's a guess. It's something that cannot be proven. So, is creation something that can be proven? Or is it something of just another form of theory?
Wes, I wouldn't be here on this program with you if we couldn't prove positively the case for origin.
Exactly.
It's there. If man will spend the time to dig and do the research, it's there.
And I think it's important that if anybody's watching this program and they want to dig deeper into this, that really want to study deeper into the human origin and all that, my friends, I encourage you to go to apologeticspress.org. That is actually something written from the Brotherhood. It's an actual organization, a nonprofit organization that basically has been writing apologetic stuff since its existence. That's why it's actually there. You can even go to focuspress.org and you can find those apologetics that they go into in-depthness of the origin of man and then how to prove certain things. So we're not talking about theories here, but we're talking about things we can prove. It's something that we can have as factual.
Right.
And there is a major difference between fact and theory.
That's exactly right.
And we need to make that sure that everybody understands that. So,
well, and let me suggest this in connection with what we've just stated here in Genesis 1:1 and 2. When you drop down to verses 26 and 27 of Genesis 1, here is God's account of man. And I want to read that for just a moment. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created him, male and female, he created them. Often the question is asked, why did God create man? Well, the answer is found right here in this verse. If you notice that God said, let them have dominion. In other words, they're going to be over all of the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over the earth, over everything that creeps on the face of the earth. And that is, God made man because man, only man, is accountable to God. God doesn't hold the animals or the plants or the birds accountable to him, but mankind is. But there's something even a little bit deeper than that. God designed and he wanted fellowship with man. Man has the ability to think, to reason, and therefore choose. God desired close fellowship with man. So man's not only here to procreate, to fill the earth, okay, and they were successful in doing that. He's not here just to obey and just to do these things, but God desired a close relationship with man. And so when we think of that and we connect these two verses along with what we've just said in Genesis 1, I think it becomes vitally important to see, let's look at this creation then, because there's little more involved than what we've just stated.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, with this whole thing, we want to give everyone and every thought to be challenged, okay? It's one thing just to state Genesis 1, verses 1 and 2, and just state it and say, oh, well, that's factual and that's it. But what about some of these other theories that are out here? I mean, do we not give them, you know, the challenge as well? Are we going to give them the same possibility? You know, something that I love doing is whenever we are talking to individuals, even of different faiths, right? I like to give them the benefit of the doubt. And we have to, okay? You're stating this, okay, let's examine it, all right? If it's true, it's true. If it's not, it's not. Will you be willing to accept that?
Sure.
And it's either you want to hold to a certain system of belief or you're really looking for answers, okay? Now, friends, there's a big difference with that, all right? It's either you're trying to defend something that you've been taught or believed in all your life and you're trying to hold to that, or you're actually trying to hold to factual things, something that can be proven, and if it's proven, it's factual, will we be willing to accept those things? So with that tonight, we want to do the same thing even with this. However, okay, is this the way that it really happened according to Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, or is it possible that things which now are actually by a process called evolution? Now, when we're talking about evolution, I know that you all have seen pictures of where it showed like a little creature and all of a sudden it evolved to a monkey. And then the monkey continued to evolve. It went to a caveman. The caveman evolved from that and became a full standing up right man, okay? Now, I know we've seen that, and it's in what we call Darwinism, okay? Charles Darwin was one that was basically given credit for whenever he went to the Galapagos Islands, right? He started seeing how these different creatures all of a sudden were adapting to their environment, and instead of it being called adaptation, which everybody does, all right? Adaptation is something that is absolutely proven to be 100% true, right? You throw an individual into the realm of a different type of situation, they will then learn to adapt, right? But because these creatures, though, some of them had different type beaks for different purposes, and it almost seemed like that this creature right here looks similar to this other creature. He drew the conclusion that it had to be that creature then evolved into this other creature, which whenever we're talking about evolution, we're not talking about one species to another. We're talking about this species actually morphing into this other type of species, and then that species mutates into another species. Okay, now understand what we're talking about here. We're talking about cross mutation. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Does the Bible even teach anything close to that?
maybe another way of illustrating it, we're not talking about different kinds of apples. We're
No.
talking about apples compared to oranges.
And you're talking about that an apple is going to evolve into an orange.
Right.
And an orange is going to evolve into a grape, and a grape is going to evolve into an olive.
Yeah.
You know, that's what we're talking about.
Right.
Brent, we're talking about crossing over species.
From one species to another.
Yes, you're crossing over that. And as we start getting into this and start talking about this whole evolution stuff, I want to get into some things that should really absolutely bother us, because whenever I was doing my studies in this and just seeing the extent of how far they're willing to go with this, it's going to turn your stomach, okay? But this is really how far it's going to go with this. But here's the thing. There was an individual by the name of Charles Smith, and what did he actually say at one particular time?
Well, to identify him, you know, he was the president of the American Association for the Advancement of Atheism, and he wrote a pamphlet called Godless Evolution. And listen carefully, 1929, he said, in the beginning was matter, okay, which begat the amoeba, which begat the worm, which begat the fish, which begat the amphibian, which begat the reptile, which begat the lower mammal, which begat the lemur, which begat the monkey, which begat man, who imagined God. Now, isn't that a mouthful? An educated man, one who was head over a very important organization as far as the atheists were concerned. But if you notice that, he says, in the beginning. I wonder if they don't believe in God, because they say, who imagined God, why do they want to begin in the beginning where the Bible does in Genesis 1:1? What's the connection there? One thing about it, friends, and we'd like to issue a little challenge here. I think you will find this to be true. Everything that the evolutionist says, he never proves. He asserts it. He says this is based upon that, but it just a casual or a more careful analysis will show that that's not the case. Now, when you believe this, see what you have. You got the amoeba, which begat the worm. Okay, you got two different species here. You got the fish. You got the amphibian, you got the reptile, you got the lower mammal, you got the lemur, you got the monkey. Each one of these, they have a crossing of species. Now, let me issue a little challenge here. When you study the Bible, you will find that that's not possible. Now, here's why. The Bible, the very Word of God, says in Genesis 1 that these will produce after his kind. You have a kind, that's why we say there may be variations of apples, okay? There may be variations of oranges and all of these other things, but you don't have a grapefruit growing on a watermelon vine. It won't happen because there's never the crossing of that. But if you look at their charts and that, they will have missing things, and those missing things, they connect dots and say that it's connected with this. So friends, be careful, watch for that, and you'll see that what Smith had to say here is far foreign from what the Bible says.
Let me explain what I was just about to explain previous. The individuals that actually believe in this thought of evolution, and they even tried to prove evolution, the thing that they are always missing is what is known as the missing link, okay? What was that missing link between that creature and the other creature? Now even to the point that if they can even prove that man came from monkeys, okay? There has to be a link, and guess what, friends? They have still not found the link.
That's right.
And here's how sick this actually gets. These biologists that, by the way, whenever you're talking about evolution, whenever you're talking about a specific type of system of teaching or whatever, do your research and see where it all comes from, okay? Because if the beginning stages, the basis of everything is not about truth, my friends, understand this. Evolution has the basis of atheism. Which, what is atheism? Trying to prove there is no God.
That's right.
That's the basis of definition of atheism, all right? And so here's what they'll be willing to go to. I was watching a documentary, I think it was on BBC America, and they were doing a documentary of the missing link, and I think the thing that they called it was either Annie or Ruby. I forgot exactly which one it was. But basically they said, oh, we found the missing link. Right here is in the same digging spot. They found this ape-like creature with the bones of a human. There you go. You have the missing link. Well, they dug a little bit deeper with this whole project. Come to find out, these biologists killed their own children. Now listen to this. Killed their own children, decayed their bodies, put their bones into the same bone findings of this ape, and they came out saying they found the missing link. Would you be willing to kill your child just to try to prove something that's really not factual, but to give yourself credit as being the one that found the missing link? Do you see what I mean? It's ludicrous. It's sickening how far they're willing to go to try to prove something that they just simply cannot prove. Mm-hmm. They're trying to deceive you. They're trying to throw in every single wrench of that. If they can just bring about a sense of doubt within you, they have won. Why? Because the fact of the matter is, what does Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 6 say? He says, for without faith it is impossible to please Him, talking about God. For he who comes to God must, now understand, whenever he says must, it shows an obligation, must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek after Him. See, if they can just generate just a sense of doubt, you've given up your faith whether you admit it or not.
That's right.
So, just like what I said, whenever you're talking about that which teaches creation, which teaches the existence of God, it teaches that God was there in the very beginning, that God, who is the author of this book, is actually showing us the origin of everything. It's either that or you're holding on to something that is atheistic, which is proving or trying to prove that there is no God. And then, okay, so if it's creation, that means that atheism is wrong. And then if it's atheism that's right, then it means that creation's wrong. But to mingle these two things together, you're having to then say, okay, let's just do the creation evolution theory. Okay? Let's believe that. It sums up everything together. Can you really believe in something that teaches there is a God and that there is no God at the same time? No, my friends, you can't.
You can never marry them.
You can never marry them. They're never going to go hand in hand. Never. And so it's either creation is true or evolution is true. They can't both be true. So when we get down deeper into this, there are some major problems, Herculean problems that they have to deal with.
Yes. You know, Wes, you mentioned about the killing of their children and mixing them with those bones. Yeah. Let me tell you another practice that they've done. Henry M. Morris, in his book, Creation, he gives case after case after case, where in their digging their findings, they found like a jawbone of an ox, of a various creature. And then, because of another tool that we have, plaster of Paris, they made a mold of a man. And that's where they got from one species to another. You take away their plaster of Paris and you destroy their models because the Bible will not fit what they have to say.
I think it's interesting too, whenever they're doing these finds and they're saying, hey, right here's some bones, and it seems like this is actually the bones of a human, right? And they try to fit it into place with the animal, and every single time it never fits. Even the closest thing that they've even come to was a pig's bone. And they go, oh, that was it? No, sorry, even that was wrong, you know?
And do you notice it always comes down to just, they only found one bone?
One bone.
Yeah.
One. And
That's all they needed with their imagination.
Yeah, that's all you need. I mean, here's the thing. If it is truly the case, my friends, that evolution is true, then there would be a plethora of evidence that is out here showing this. You should be able to go to all these digging spots and anywhere all over the world, right? And find these crossing breeds, okay? Where you have different species now being mingled together, making one other creature. But I think it's interesting to note that even whenever you try to crossbreed something, it becomes into a status that it cannot procreate.
That's right.
Think about that for a second. What's a mule? I mean, they want to cross a donkey with a horse. So you've got the strength and the power and might of the horse being mingled in with the other animal that's also a very headstrong creature. Put both of them together, man, it makes one awesome farm creature, right? But I think it's interesting how a mule can never procreate.
That's right.
It was not intended to.
Never intended. Never intended.
But with evolution, what are you going to have? You're going to have procreation after procreation after procreation of all these changes, and you're going to have just a bunch of evidence laid out everywhere. I mean, if according to them, evolution takes millions and millions of years, 4.5 millions of years is what they're basically trying to say now. If that be the case, wouldn't you not have a bunch of remains to prove your point?
There remaineth none.
There remains none.
But you know, Wes, they've got 3 Herculean hurdles that they've got to
Exactly.
get over. And they're impossible. The first one has to be that matter is eternal. Now, did you notice in the statement by Smith a few moments ago? In the beginning was matter. They always begin there. It kind of reminds me of the story where a couple of atheists got together and they said, you know, we don't need God anymore. We've mapped out the DNA. We've got this thing down. So they said, God, are you up to a challenge? Okay. They said, God said, well, let's put that to a test. Let's make man. And they agreed. So they started compacting their dirt, and God said, no, wait just a minute. He said, create your own dirt. Well, they couldn't do it. Eternality of matter. Somehow, they have life coming from non-life. There's just one problem with that. We have no biblical example. We have no scientific proof that has ever occurred. And so you don't have things developing from water, from gases, from rocks and dirt and all of these things. So the Bible would state that matter is not eternal.
You know, this is the biggest question that they always have, because see, this matter, this molecule or whatever that they say it was out there at the very beginning, the one question they can't answer is, where did that molecule come from? I mean, think about this. For there to be creation, right? This earth in its entire existence, one of 3 possibilities, okay? Either it was basically created from nothing, okay? It was from nothing, all of a sudden came something. It's eternal. Or creation was true. It had to be created, right? Now, scientists in and of themselves understand that something can't come from nothing. That's why they have to have that molecule.
Right.
But again, the fact of the matter is they have to have that molecule to be there, but they can't answer the question on where that molecule come from.
Right.
Number two, it's eternal. They don't even believe in that. And if you remember back in history, Edwin Hubble, who was the inventor of the Hubble telescope, actually made a gigantic discovery, friends. And what that was is that he noticed that the universe in and of itself was actually expanding, okay? Now, here's the unique thing about it. If it's expanding, then guess what it has to do whenever you go in reverse? It all comes down to a beginning point. You know what that teaches? It teaches us that it's not eternal. And therefore, my friends, understand this one fact. If something can't come from nothing and it's not eternal, then it has to be created. All right? And we're looking at that from a scientific perspective.
A second thing that we have to consider as one of those Herculean hurdles that the evolutionists have to get over is that they have a great big nothing somehow and somewhere got busy and made something. You have nothing, and then they made something. I've never quite understood how you can have nothing make something. If there is nothing, there's nothing.
Let me ask you a simple question, which I just made mention of the point that they even understand that something can't come from nothing. Because if you put nothing in a box and you leave it there for thousands of years, what are you going to get in the end?
Nothing.
Nothing. Because nothing is always going to equal to nothing.
That's right.
Right? You've got to put something in for there to be something.
That's right.
So, with that being the case, you have a great big nothing and just a vast void that's out there. And then somehow it just got busy and became something. And now this is where they get the whole Big Bang Theory coming in, right? But I want to ask you something. Whenever you're talking about the law of cause and effect, the law of cause and effect, and I think it's very interesting how whenever you start reading in the creation account, my friends, in Genesis 1, you're going to find that there are scientific laws, natural laws that are actually being established with this, okay? First of all, I mean, you've got the law of biogenesis that's being placed here. Also the law of cause and effect, which simply makes this statement. For there to be an effect, there has to be an equal or greater cause to cause that effect, okay? Now, I want to ask you just a simple thought. Can you see a molecule with the naked eye? Yes or no? No, you got to have a microscope, right? You've got to have that blown up under a lens to actually see something that's microscopic. That's what a molecule is. But you mean to tell me that that little molecule is something that's all of a sudden going to explode and cause a more explosion, and then you have the order and the everything that we have today? Really? Does that make any sense at all? I mean, think about this. This right here, I can see with the naked eye, right? But that came from something that was one molecule that was floating around, to all of a sudden causing everything into existence, where now you need a telescope to see everything around it. That totally goes against scientific laws. And there's a reason why, Clifford, they're known as scientific laws, just like the law of gravity. If I throw this up, I expect it to come back down. Why? Because, guess what? The law of gravity takes to effect. You have to have fuel in order to counteract that. That's why we have airplanes. That's why we have rockets that go into outer space. We have those, but what do they have to have in order to get out of this atmosphere? They have to have fuel. But what happens, Clifford, when the fuel runs out?
They don't go.
They don't go. They come back down. Gravity's going to take effect, right?
That's right.
Laws are laws because they can be proven 100% of the time. So when you're talking about the law of biogenesis, the law of cause and effect, the law of gravity, any of those scientific laws, evolution actually goes totally against that.
Right.
It goes totally against even this whole creation type theory, all right, that they're trying to say is false, right? Because the fact is, if we're here, how did we get here? That's the question that we're asking today. How did we get here? It's either we got here for evolution or we were created.
That's right. And you know, Wes, all of those laws that are scientific that we go by, you can find in Genesis 1, in the
Exactly.
account of creation.
Exactly.
Every one of them.
You know, this point that we're making right here, that a great big nothing somehow, somewhere got busy and made something, right? I think it's interesting to note here that since they realize that nothing physically can come from nothing, right? Something can't come from nothing. But there has to be something of the physical nature. Did you know that the Bible actually explains this as well? If you turn your Bibles, friends, over here to Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11. The Hebrew writer makes a very valid statement in respect to creation and really the things that are in existence and all that. In Hebrews chapter 11 and verse number 3, he says, "By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God." Now watch this. "So that the things that are seen were not made of things which are visible." Now what is he basically saying? He's saying this, that everything that we have material-wise was not here and made from things that were already here. Literally in physical sense, guess what, my friends? Something did come from nothing. But that nothing that you're trying to say is that of the physical. We're talking about a spiritual being here. Therefore, it's no longer nothing. Something made something, and that something is the God of heaven himself, who made everything into existence by the word of his mouth.
You know, Wes, we stated in the very beginning that it's either God and creation or it's evolution.
Exactly.
And isn't that proven, that very fact? You can't have both of them.
No.
But you know, there's another problem that they have to get over, and that is that everything is simply an illusion of one's imagination. Nothing is real. You're not real. Things that we use computers, we use Bibles, we use electronic things, all of these, none of that is real. It's just a figment of one's imagination.
And why would we say this? Because according to them, remember what Charles Smith just said, is that through this whole evolutionary theory, right, after it became man, it all of a sudden came the thought of God. Therefore, God is just an illusion. He's a mythical creature, and therefore, in all reality, if we did come from God, and he's mythical, he's an illusion of our imagination, right? Then ultimately, guess what? You'd have to then say that all of us are nothing but an illusion. So
That's right.
it's just these Herculean hurdles that evolutionists just have to deal with, but they can't. And therefore, friends, the creation, therefore, was the work of an intelligent, benevolent God, unlimited in power. For from nothing he made the heavens and the earth. That is, he spoke and they came to be. Clifford, I love saying this. Whenever you're talking about the Big Bang Theory, I always say, did you know that I actually believe in the Big Bang? And people go, what do you mean by that? I say, God said it and bang, it happened, right? That's the Bang Theory that I know of. And by the way, it's not a theory, is it?
No.
I believe in the Big Bang.
That's right.
So God himself spoke everything into existence. And even particular verses within the Bible even declares this as well. Whenever even God said to Job, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. There in Job 38 and verse 4. Job 38 is full of just evidence for a lot of things, because God is questioning Job and just simply asking him the question, where were you when I framed the world? Where were you? If you want to explain things to me, go ahead and explain it.
You know, I envision something here.
Yeah.
I can just envision that these evolutionists come up to God and just, you know, God said to them, "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Where were you when all of these things were set in motion?" Isn't it interesting that thousands of years after the time of creation, these people exist that know more than God did, and God's the one that brought it all into being.
Yep.
But I find that true in biblical criticism. Those that live far enough removed from an event that happened are the ones that are claiming that it never happened. Those people during that time, they didn't believe that. They've all believed it. So isn't it interesting? What would God say to that evolutionist? You know, if he were to question God, where were you when I did this? And he goes into great detail in Job 38.
Oh, he does.
You know, talks about the water and the fountains, and you know, we understand the paths of the seas, Psalm 8, and that. And man later learned about how the best way to ship things is following the paths of the seas,
Almost
which
like
we
God
still
put it
do
there,
today.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. But you know, I think it's important for us to realize that even there are passages that emphatically declare that Jehovah God is responsible for the creation of things and not just senseless evolution. Just like in Hebrews chapter 1 and verse number 10. And then whenever we read these, understand that all these other references are actually declaring this as well. All right? Basically, this is the New Testament rendition of what was stated back in the Old Testament. And in verse number 10 of Hebrews chapter 1, it says, "And you, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands." And then you've got like Psalm 8 verse 3 that says the same exact thing. And then also Psalm 19 verse 1 says the same thing. But you know, I think it's very interesting that the psalmist also says this: "The fool has said in his own heart, there is no God." What would God say to the evolutionist?
The same thing. You know, the word fool there,
Yeah.
Nabal, means an empty person, empty-minded.
Yeah.
Because all of the evidence has been given, and they reject that. Now, what can they put in its place?
Exactly. You know, Noah and I were talking about this last night, and talking about how individuals actually believe in atheism, that that in all reality they have to have more faith to be an atheist than to simply accept facts. Because to be an atheist, you literally have to have all this evidence in front of you and go, nope. Or they have all these evidences before them and they have to walk around with their eyes closed saying, nope, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to believe what I want to believe, because guess what? That's not the case. And they continue walking around like that. It takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to simply accept the facts of everything. And how sad that is, that people will actually spend their hard-earned money, their time, endless efforts to try to disprove what's simply slapping them right in the face.
Right.
It's sad, ain't it?
It's very sad.
It's very,
Very
very sad. And therefore, whenever you think about this, I think it's interesting that as we start getting into this, and I know that we're going to have to pick up on this next week. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. We got a lot of material with this. But it is the case that since evolutionists contend that the Earth is 4.3 billion years old, okay, where does all this time fit? I mean, they have to fit it somewhere.
Yes.
They have to.
Right.
Because even if, okay, so you're saying here that, like, the Bible in and of itself states, whenever you start looking at the genealogies and start looking at the length of time that people lived and all this other stuff, and start breaking everything down, the Earth is simply around 6,000 to 10,000 years old, according to genealogy records, right? But here's the thing. Those individuals that try to mix creation with evolution how are you going to say in one side of your mouth that the earth is only 16,000 years old, but at the same time out of the other side of the mouth that the earth is 4.5 billion years old? See, there's no way you can ever marry those two together.
No.
You can't.
No.
One says that there is a God, the other says there's not.
Right.
16,000 years old. Guess what? 4.5 billion. So,
And even those, Wes, that, as you correctly pointed out, that believe in creation or believe in God and believe in evolution, that God created everything that first week, and then God adapted a hands-off policy and
Yeah.
allowed evolution to take place.
that's a very dangerous thought.
It's a
by the
very
way.
dangerous thought, but you know what I have found is that most in the religious world believe that and hold to that, if when they're not atheists. And in fact, out in Denver, Colorado, we have an institute for creation, and more and more scientists, friends, listen to this. More and more scientists are admitting that their theory cannot be proved and are turning to some form of creation. Now, I'm afraid that it may be that they've got God using evolution to bring about these things, but be that as it may, there are those that are being honest with themselves and said, listen, we can't prove this. We've just been hoodwinking the people all these years.
I want to ask you a simple question, then get into this. Why would individuals even play with the thought of trying to mingle these two together?
It's a way that they can say that they believe in God. Because in our society today, unless you're an atheist, you're going to be looked down upon. You're going to be frowned upon if you say there is absolutely no God. Because there's many people that believe in some form of God. Now, whether they believe all of the true aspects of God, that's another debate, okay? But many hold to that. And so one is going to be literally laughed out of town if they don't believe. So here's a way, here's a system that they can say, well, I believe in God. I believe God created matter. I believe God created these things. And I believe that when he rested, and he put the process of evolution in, and so everything is, you know, I've thought about that. And that still gives me a problem. If God did that, and everything is subject to the evolution, why are we not getting better? Why are we dying?
Exactly. Exactly.
Why are things going through that
well,
process?
I think it's ironic how the scientists will actually say who believe in evolution and things, because we've got some true biblical scientists in our brotherhood, and we need more of them.
Yes.
To combat all these things.
Right.
But there's a reason why we have to have those scientists in order to combat this, and there's a reason why, and I'll get to that here in just a second. But whenever you're talking about these individuals that are believing this whole deal with evolution, they look down upon the individuals who are even challenging them. Because they say, okay, where's your PhD? Where's your scientist degree? Where is this? Oh, you're just that individual? Well, until you actually come up on my level, only then can you ever talk to me. And basically what they've done is that they have bullied these individuals into this type of thought. I mean, think about this. You're not going to talk to me unless you address me in my own terms. With your own degree that matches mine. Only then are you able to talk to me. No. No.
Do you know that that was actually said to me?
Oh, yeah. And I've actually been told by certain individuals that the reason why they went on to become a scientist was for the reason that they could talk to these individuals.
Yeah.
Because they won't talk to you.
No.
And they'll use these 100-gallon words that are out here and say, oh, you don't understand what I'm talking about? You don't need to talk to me. And pride.
Yes.
Pride goes before destruction and the Holy Spirit before a
Absolutely.
fall. And therefore, people don't challenge these individuals, besides those who are scientists, who actually have a PhD behind them,
Right.
so that they will be held in a credible sense of being able in their eyes to talk to them.
Right.
Because here's the thing, they don't look at things from a simplistic form.
Right.
I mean, if it even crumbles at the very beginning of something, the rest of it crumbles. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But they don't want to accept that.
Right.
They want to prove everything and spend your hard-earned money, your hard-earned time, right, on trying to prove something that has not ever been proven and can never
And
be
you can
proven.
never- That's right. That's exactly
Therefore,
right.
let me ask you this question then. If you are pursuing that in life, what have you accomplished?
It's just been a waste.
It's a waste. It's a waste.
It's a waste. Let's assume for a moment that they are true, that there is no God. In the day of judgment, how's that going to affect me? On the other hand, if we are correct in saying that there is a God, how's that going to affect him? There's a lot at stake here.
Let me tell you this, though. This is what was very eye-opening to me. There was, at a previous work, we had a mom and dad who had their daughter just started, I think it was in the 2nd or 3rd grade. She just started science, right? Just started it. And I said, do you mind if I see your book just real quick? And so she gave it to me, and I opened up to the very first paragraph of the entire book. And this is even an introduction part. There is nothing different than the grass of the field and you. Right off the get-go, parents, understand this is what your child is being taught. And the fact is, if we're not teaching them the truth at home, I mean, this individual, I mean, this person has their teaching degree. This person has their PhD or whatever. They are a scientist teaching this to your child. So just because they have those credentials, that they can't, they've got to be right, right? Absolutely not. Even in our own, what we call Christian universities, my friends, even in biology class, they're making it as if evolution is just a thought. It's a possibility. It's just your opinion. My friends, it's not an opinion. It's not an opinion. It's something that you have to either say that there is a God or there's not. And whenever you're facing that fact, you can't intermingle the both of them. And don't be fooled by credentials. I've seen so many times the education making the person, then the person make the education.
Right.
What do I mean by that? There's a lot of people out here who allow their education to make the person, even though they have a PhD, it means nothing more than a post-hole digger. Now, I don't mean that for every single case, but if you're allowing the education to make you, and you're saying that I am who I am because of the education that I have, my friends, understand something. If you are unwilling to look logically at the simple facts, that PhD means nothing.
That's right.
It means absolutely nothing.
Now, friends, please understand this very carefully here. We're not saying that you have to have this great education. You got to have the PhD. You have to have all this learning and that.
Absolutely.
No, you can take the Word of God. You can read and study it, and if you'll be honest with yourself, you can understand the truth. Jesus said in John 8, if you continue in my word, then are you my disciples indeed. Now listen carefully. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
Amen.
Wes, we've had our grandparents, and we've had people in the past and that had very little education, formal education, as we call book learning. But they understood the principle when they sowed that seed that it was going to produce a harvest. And many of them, when they came to the Bible, they applied the same logic and reasoning. And friends, you can understand the truth if you want to.
Absolutely.
What we're saying here and what we're cautioning against is many have sought and this is an eternal degree, thinking that gives them the credentials that they can say whatever they want. That is not the case.
No, it is not.
It's not the case at all. Now, Wes, we've been talking about all of this time. And so they've been talking about this 4.3 billion years. There's not but 3 positions that we can find where this is possible. Number one, they say, okay, it happened before the days of creation. Now, what they mean by that, we'll not go in great detail. We'll pick this up later. But they say that there was a pre-Adamic race that became so evil that God had to destroy it. So between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, there's this immense space where they would get all of these years. Okay, that's one position. A second position says, well, okay, it didn't happen then. It had to have been during the days of creation. So now what we're reading about is when you're reading about day 1 and day 2 and that, you're reading about a long eon period of time. Okay? And but I've never found one of them to state just how long that is.
I've had some actually say that it's 1,000 years. Some people say that it was 1,000,000 years and then millions of billions of years.
Right.
But again, that still comes down to opinion and not fact.
Yeah, it's never documented that
There you
this is
go.
the case. So if it didn't happen before creation, then it had to have happened during creation. If it didn't happen then, the only other possibility is that it happened after creation. Now, in all fairness, I could not find anyone that would take that position. That has been given up a long time ago, because the way that we can count time, and we can go back to the time when they held up Joshua's hands and the lost day that's there. And man can
Even
go back.
NASA still says there's a lost day in there somewhere and they
Right.
can't figure it out. Well, we know the answer to it.
We know the answer to it.
Absolutely.
But you could go all the way back to the beginning. Not that we have to.
Yeah.
But these are the only 3 possibilities.
So the fact is, I guess, friends, you're going to have to come back next week as we start getting into really explaining each one of these possibilities.
Yes.
Because I'm here to tell you, these are prominent views that are held in universities, in Christendom, okay? Even from certain pulpits, this is being preached. And so with that being the case, we want you to come back next week as we get into this even further. But friends, I want you to know that we are just so very thankful for you joining us and everything. If you do have any type of questions or comments, you can message us right here on Facebook or make a comment down there in the comment section on YouTube. Feel free to ask whatever question you have, and I promise you, friends, we will deal with it.
That's right.
You know why? If there's an answer, we'll do the digging and trying to find the answer if we don't know it already. But the fact is, truth doesn't hide.
That's right.
If it's a fact, God will let us know. So with that being the case, we want to help you any way we possibly can. If you are a believer in evolution and things like that, and you want to challenge us on some things, challenge us. We openly accept it. So with that being the case, thank you again so much for joining us tonight. But until next time, next week, 7 p.m., Tuesday night, we'll be right here on Central Bible Talk. Thank you all. We love you. Have a great night.